Good evening. My name is Kate Mahoney, and I'm the Executive Director of the Naomi Ruth Cohen Institute for Mental Health Education at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. I'm delighted tonight to be joined by Eliza Hofman, who is with Yellow Brick Foundation in Evanston, and she's going to talk to us a little bit tonight about some great strategies that we can use in our families about helping people cope with stress, ourselves, our children, our loved ones, and using mindfulness techniques and other strategies just to kind of get by in life every day, because life is pretty stressful for some of us, and so it's really good to be thinking proactively about having some good skills to manage stress and to take good care of ourselves. So Eliza, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here this evening.
And one of the nice things is you were a presenter at our recent conference that we had on integrating mental and physical health that took place in Evanston in June. And we just got such great feedback on your session that I thought if we could bring you on the show, it'd be a great way to kind of bring some of these skills and strategies right into people's living rooms for those of us who might not make it to a conference or be able to get out all the time. And or on a really warm day like today where we might want to be able to be thinking about positive, proactive strategies. So can we just talk a little bit about some of the ways that you help both teens, young adults, I know you do a lot of work with adolescents and emerging adults, and their families in terms of coping with stress, some of the things that you're seeing people dealing with, and then how you help people learn new skills and strategies.
Absolutely. So at Yellow Brick, my title is Integrative Services Specialist, which means that I use yoga, mindfulness, and some techniques from theater and the arts to help people both regulate themselves, ground themselves, and also to get to know themselves better and to help in relationships with peers, so how they interact with others. A lot of people that I deal with come from a trauma background, so they have dysregulation in their sort of ability to be present, be aware of their body and space. And so we really begin by basics and foundations of mindfulness.
And helping people kind of connect. And when you talk about trauma, I think, there's a lot of conversation about trauma, but sometimes people don't fully know what we mean or the range of things that might be considered traumatic. And, there's been such great work done now on understanding sort of adverse childhood experiences, early trauma. But can you talk about some of the different things, maybe on a spectrum that you might see? Because there's sort of trauma that can sometimes feel like more like big T or little T trauma, and where people fall.
Absolutely. So in our sort of little T trauma, and as I even talk about this, just to keep in mind that typically, the external event, what has happened to a person, is not in fact what I'm talking about when I'm talking about trauma. What I'm talking about is the individual's reaction to the adverse event. So one person can experience a big T trauma, say an attack, or some kind of physical damage to their person, and move on with their life and not have any reaction to it, other than maybe immediate processing. For others who perhaps experience a sexual trauma, either a prolonged experience of sexual trauma or a single incident, they might have a more traumatic response where memories, flashbacks, physical sensations stay with them for a long time. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about trauma, is sort of that ongoing experience in the physical body of whatever triggered the trauma. And so for some people, that could be bullying in school, being made fun of, psychological bullying. It could have to do with gender identification. For example, that might be something that could cause someone to experience the symptoms of trauma. Or, like I said before, it could be more of a physical attack on somebody's person. And then there's also more of cultural trauma, things happening in our society that don't directly occur to someone. The, terrorist attack kind of situation where then just the fear of that occurring can produce symptoms of trauma.
So it's really helpful to see that there's kind of a broad range, that different people might respond differently to the same set of circumstances. And what I love about your approach is there's no judgment in that. There's no thing to say there's a right or wrong way. So if people experienced a house fire, or people experienced a physical attack, or something like you described as sexual trauma, there's no judgment in that. How someone's responding is, again, like not right, or they're having a bigger reaction than someone else, or a lesser reaction. But rather, you try and help people who based on whatever their individual experience is, but to help them maximize their resilience.
Correct.
And move forward in a way so that they're not trapped by what has happened previously.
Exactly. And the foundation for all of the work that I do in terms of that, resilience is mindfulness, which is sort of defined as the ability to abide in your awareness. They say non-judgmentally. I think that sometimes is judgmental. I think that we have natural judgments. But the idea being to not react to the judgment in the moment, to have a mindful attitude about your judgments, and to practice your awareness and non-judgment, non-reactivity, while, in my work, in a supported environment. So feeling that you can practice being mindful when there's support around you. In my case, as a yoga therapist, I do that. Peer groups can provide that support, so that when then you try to practice mindfulness on your own, you have already a foundation.
And as you're looking at mindfulness, you're really trying to help people be more aware and be able to focus on themselves. And sometimes, I think it gets challenging in today's world. So many of us are pulled in so many directions, whether it be I know you do a lot of work with adolescents and young adults, emerging adults.
Absolutely.
Who are often pulled with lots of social media and school or work and family and peer groups and lots of different directions.
Yeah.
And I think as adults, many of us feel like we're wearing multiple hats at the same time, or we're at our job, but we're managing our families and we're trying to cope with lots of things.
Right.
So you're trying to help people kind of be able to quiet some of that outside noise, focus in on themselves so that they can take better care of themselves and then actually ultimately be more productive because they're not pulled so much, right?
Right, exactly. So that is sort of the hook to it, is that it feels like, why should I take time out of my busy schedule getting all the things I need to get done to sit quietly and do nothing? And the trick is that actually you are not doing nothing when you're practicing mindfulness. What you're actually doing is teaching your brain to be in a state of mindful awareness, to be calm, to be non-reactive. It gives you the opportunity to choose more often than not what it is you then do with your time afterward. Social media is great for distracting us, for pulling our focus. And what mindfulness teaches is the ability to control your own focus. How do you teach your brain to be in charge of what it's focusing on? And very simple techniques can help do this, but you do have to take a break and practice it.
And when in your work at Yellowbrook, do you do this with both teenagers and young adults as well as their family members, or are you mostly focusing on the teens and young adults?
Yeah,
or?
so in my work, I typically work with the teens and the emerging adults, and I work with them in group formats. We have a mindfulness curriculum that we do every morning. We have a mindfulness activity that is followed by intentions for the day, and those mindfulness activities range from breathing techniques to meditation to relaxation, and even other types of mindfulness which can be more active. You can be active with your mindfulness, tossing balls around and being aware of your breath, for example. So I do that with our emerging adults every day. And then I work with our adolescents also on sort of more sustainable, longer term mindfulness activities, because I don't see them as often, so I kind of have to do more in the moment when I can. So longer meditation practices, deep relaxation practices. So I haven't had the opportunity just yet to work with families. That being said, I do work with our staff on mindfulness as well, because being mental health service providers, there is a lot of drain and strain that comes into our kind of work. So mindfulness can really bolster and support your own ability to be present for people. So that is some of the work that I do. I have lots of ideas about how to work with a family and what it means to be mindful with another person. It is very helpful to have a shared vocabulary, definitely amongst the peer groups. You know, they all know what to say to each other to help each other become grounded. To come into the present moment is a big statement I make. What's happening now? What's happening now? And trying to get people to shift their focus into that. Because as we look at family relationships, there's a lot of mom's thinking about the future, the kids thinking about right now. Where, you know, are we going to go? Who's going to do what? Who's going to pay for that? And a lot of those questions heighten emotion. And so the family becomes ruptured in their inability to kind of stay present. What's going on in our discussion right in this moment?
Right. That's all, you know, it sounds like you're doing such positive things. And I've seen some pretty exciting things in terms of even that there are some schools that are focusing on teaching their students mindfulness as a way of not only helping them with academics, but helping them in their own self-care and the relationships within classrooms and within the school building.
Yeah.
And then I do a lot of mental health education in workplaces, and I've seen more and more workplaces embracing mindfulness and talking about it, whether it be some people are using a mindfulness app on their phone, or that there are workplaces that have set aside quiet space for people to go and practice mindfulness, recognizing what we were talking about earlier, that even though it might be a workplace that generally is almost demanding people multitask, right? That, you know, you're on a conference call and answering emails at the same time, et cetera. But that even giving people, you know, 10 minutes to go have this quiet time can actually boost productivity. So it actually can boost the bottom line of a company by also improving people's health and overall well-being. So there's so many bonuses or win-win kind of things that people can take out of it, which is exciting to see.
We know that mindfulness activities, including meditation and breathing exercises, improve cognition. Your ability to think gets clearer. We know that mindfulness activities reduce your stress hormone, so reducing cortisol levels, things along those lines, which interfere with productivity. When you're feeling too aroused, too stressed out, your nervous system is not able to function very well, and you get sort of pushed out of what we might call the window of tolerance in terms of being able to complete daily tasks. And that absolutely translates into workplace and to schools, because we have kids who are too stressed out, we have workers who are too stressed out to be productive.
To be able to, just do their functions. I do want to remind viewers that you are welcome to call in. Our call-in number is 312-738-1060. And Eliza is here to help take calls and answer your questions. And as we're talking about this, one thing I do want to say, sometimes when I introduce the idea, and actually I'm going out to a community group to talk about mindfulness tomorrow, is sometimes I've had a little bit of pushback where people sort of think like either it's a luxury or is it a little bit of mumbo jumbo. And so I'm curious about when people kind of ask you those questions or say those things, how you kind of help people see what this really is and the benefits.
So being present and being mindful when you're in a state of resistance is an excellent exercise. And so usually when I am up against some resistance, I try to activate my own mindfulness. Notice, what am I feeling? So, for example, not all resistance is the same. And if I slow down and become mindful, I might notice what my personal reaction is to the individual or individuals who are giving me some pushback. And sometimes it is fear, and I'll notice that in my own body. Sometimes it is anger. There's something about the idea of stopping and slowing down that inspires sort of a, well, you gotta notice what you're feeling when you stop and slow down. So if that is something that you're not comfortable with and don't like doing, that's gonna make you angry to do that. So using my own mindfulness is sort of my first step in dealing with situations where people are resistant to mindfulness. That being said, then it's really, the thing about mindfulness that is tricky is that one learns through practice. I can give you all the neuroscience, and I can show you the studies that talk about how our medial prefrontal cortex comes online more when we are mindful, and so we're better able to make rational decisions, observe our behavior non-judgmentally. I mean, there's lots of science coming up around it. And for some people, education is hopeful. That does help them buy in. So sometimes I will come with some neuroscience or some kind of thing along those lines.
Facts,
Some facts. Great. That being said, again, it's also about finding which kind of mindfulness is going to work for which individual. If I have a person who is very anxious, who cannot sit still, who needs to move their body, I'm not going to ask them to do sitting meditation first. Okay, we're going to do some moving, we're going to do some breathing, we're going to do mindfulness in action, for example. On the flip side, I have somebody who's real depressed, or even just doesn't like to move that much, doesn't feel like getting up out of their chair. We're going to start where they are.
Okay.
Feel the ground beneath you. Notice what's happening now. What part of your body moves as you breathe? And so if we start people who are resistant in a comfort zone, with the mindfulness that sort of works for their comfort zone, they are more likely to participate.
Okay.
Now, you can then, over time, start to stretch that comfort zone. Be like, okay, now we did some breathing in the chair. What is it like to stand up? What do you feel under your feet? Where you have tension? Your jaw, your shoulders? So you can start to then shift it. But, yeah, my own mindfulness combined with meeting them where they're at, maybe a little bit of science, usually gets people on board.
Now, what do you think, and I know this is beyond what you typically would be doing at Yellowbrook, but for parents who have younger children, I've seen some pretty cool things with this pediatrician, right? Nadine Burke-Harris, who's written this amazing book. And I've seen videos where she's showing stuff happening in classrooms. And so it seems exciting to me to think about for parents that they could be maybe teaching some things to their preschoolers or children that are in elementary school that would be skills that would help them kind of cope with life.
Right. So I am a biased case study here, but I have a 4-year-old, and we do various mindfulness techniques in my house that have really paid off for us. So putting it into their language is extremely important. My son has learned breathing techniques, and we call them birthday candles. So blowing out your birthday candles. And that is enough. I mean, he's able to help himself ground by using his own breath. He had to get stitches in his ear when he fell on our coffee table, and he laid there on that table going while that doctor stitched him up. So he was able to regulate himself through that. There is also there are great things on YouTube about how to turn yoga practices into stories. So taking what we might call the sun salutation and making it like a journey. All of the animal poses you can name for kiddos, get involved. I had a experience teaching parents and children, young children yoga, and so I had all the parents do the tree pose, which is where you stand up nice and tall, and had all the kiddos be squirrels, where they ran around the trees. So it's sort of taking, the sort of simple basics and applying that to kid language, and it can be very helpful. Also, I'm big into the pre-bed routine every night. Gratitude is a very strong mindfulness practice, and teaching your kiddo to say 1 or 2 things they were grateful for that day before they go to bed.
How lovely.
Really really lovely.
So that, it's interesting because I certainly see families sometimes do that around holidays, the Thanksgiving holiday or whatever. But the notion of incorporating that on a daily basis, and that in and of itself is a mindfulness technique, so that someone who, again, might hear the word mindfulness and say, that's sort of new agey, or I don't know. And yet when you talk about that, or, that seems like it's a practice that many families might find beneficial. Especially in today's world where, again, sometimes it's hard for families to even have time to talk with each other, let alone to talk about what they might be grateful for. But getting that into a routine sounds really
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah.
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 So that's exciting to me to think about, things that people can do early on in their families to create ritual and to teach skills that are so empowering. So when you describe that instance with your son, what could be, again, very traumatic event of getting an injury
yeah.
and needing stitches and falling on a piece of furniture right there in your own house, but that he sort of, because you had prepped him with these skills, he could have his own sense of power and control while he was under the care of a physician.
Exactly, and that is a really strong point in terms of practicing mindfulness, which is that if we practice it while we are calm, while we feel supported, like I do in my groups and with my individuals, or with my kiddo at home on a regular Tuesday, that then, when you go into crisis, is practiced. The body learns things, and our implicit memory puts it into our procedural memory. We're able to activate it more easily if we practice it when we're calm and then implement it when we're not.
When there might be a crisis happening, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that, again, that notion of empowerment through skill development is to me really exciting. And what's fascinating to me is to see whether you're talking about doing it with your 4-year-old son or with teenagers or emerging adults, which I think for you guys goes up to about 30.
Yep.
And then I've seen, and in fact the group I'm doing tomorrow will be with older adults, so that this is a technique that people across, and again, while you might enter it or the things you try might be different to get into people's comfort zone, but it can be something that can be useful for people across the life cycle and in a variety of circumstances.
Absolutely, and it doesn't have to cost a lot. And there can be various ways into it. Like I've said, your yoga toolbox, mindfulness toolbox can have everything from breathing to noticing your physical body to moving to meditating. I mean, you can do so many different practices, and gratitude being a big one.
And so that's, again, very exciting to me, I think, as some people feel like when they hear about something like meditation, that sounds like a luxury, like my life is too hectic.
Right.
I work a couple jobs, I have kids, I'm trying to juggle all these things.
Yep.
Our household is maybe kind of hectic. But you're actually talking that simple things that people could do. So when they're practicing mindful breathing, that could happen even if you have a really crowded, hectic house.
Absolutely.
Or in a variety of circumstances. And the gratitude piece sounds like something that people could easily implement across any age group and regardless of what your circumstances are. And that could be a lovely ritual for people to have.
Absolutely. And if I were to give one takeaway, it would be to practice gratitude. It has effects on your physical body, on your mind, on your brain, on your breath, on your stress level, everything. And it can be done anywhere. You could be waiting in line at the grocery store and just take a little gratitude thought into your mind.
And I think that, to me, as we get ready to close out the show, is, you've talked about a variety of things, but if we just ask all of our viewers to think about this week, trying to start each day, whether it be at the end of the day or partway through when you get a moment for a lunch break, or at what point ever you can make that happen, but practicing gratitude, identifying one or two things, that would be fabulous. So viewers, families, we're going to ask that you do that, and we look forward to seeing you again. Take good care. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.